right. So I'll start off by talking a little bit about my background. So I am the Chief Product Officer at Peak.com, but I'm an engineer by education. So I started off in engineering and moved very quickly into the product side of things. I started my career at Goldman Sachs, where I built products for high net worth clients, helping rich people get richer. So I did that for a number of years until I moved to Disney and started working for Mickey Mouse. A very different world there. And there I was responsible for driving acquisition and engagement and monetization for all of Disney mobile apps. So about 150 mobile apps on the network. From Disney, I went to Uber. At Uber, I was responsible for setting the vision for the driver app as it exists today, and also led the launch of Uber's first public API, which was a big highlight. After Uber, I went to StyleSeat. StyleSeat is the biggest beauty marketplace in the world, and there I launched several revenue streams to monetize the platform that had driven over $3 billion in beauty services. And after StyleSeat, I came to Peak.com. So I've been at the company for over 4 years. And our mission at Peak.com is to connect the world through experiences. And the way we do that is by connecting people like you and me to operators who are providing great experiences around the world. And this is so important in a time that we're also isolated. So let me tell you a little bit about Peak.com. Okay. So we are one of the few travel companies that are actually thriving during the pandemic. And it's not because, people are traveling at this time, but it's because people are itching to do safe experiences around their house, right? So example would be virtual cooking classes, kayak rentals, drive-through pumpkin patches, drive-through movies. So it's been a really great experience seeing how the world has changed and how even our company has had to adapt during this time. And we are hiring, so please check out the openings. We're definitely looking for a head of B2C to own our consumer side, but several other openings in operations and sales. So with that, as I start to talk about the presentation, so as I was thinking about what to talk about when it comes to the art of zooming in and zooming out, I reminded myself that I'm going to be presenting to a group of product leaders. So I can't just go into the solution and say, here are my tips to zoom in and zoom out. I figured I should start by talking about the problem. So we're going to talk about what is the problem we're trying to solve, why it's worth solving, and then we'll talk about solutions where I'll talk about 4 tips on mastering the art of zooming in and zooming out. So let's start with the problem. So for me, when I think about product leadership, a big dilemma that product leaders go through is whether to zoom in or zoom out. And to actually, I would love to pause here and have an interactive conversation with this group to understand if this is something that resonates with the group. So my question to this group is, in the last 6 months, year, have you been in a situation where you were so zoomed into a problem and it wasn't until you zoomed out and got the full big picture that did you actually see the benefit and were able to find the path forward? You can use the chat or speak up.
I can share.
Yeah.
So I personally struggle with that. Currently as senior product manager, was hired knowing that I'm going to be knees deep in the detail on the project side. The downside to that is that I feel like I'm a glorified project manager, and that's been a theme at every other product management gig I've been at. And so I do struggle because all of my focus and attention has been zooming in on the details. It's difficult for me to okay, I got to switch gears, step back. Like, what impact is what I'm working on going to impact the business in both the short, medium, and long term? So to answer your question, it's very difficult and I'm struggling. So an answer to that would be, hey, learn how to mentor other product managers on the team so that they can take that over so that I can step back and look at the holistic view. It's really difficult to do both and do both well at the same time.
Yeah. Totally resonates with me. Any other examples on that front?
I think one thing for me, hi Navya, I work at a gaming company, and most of my product experience for the last for up to 8 years was on game teams, and it always sounded, we were always getting these sort of directives from on high saying, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. And it seemed like sort of a waste of time. And now I find myself on a central team, and I'm actually seeing, for the bird's eye view of, the compliance issues, the business risk of not doing this, these changes or whatever it is, and being able to have that bird's eye view and seeing the larger picture of, trends within the ecosystem, and what we do now will potentially, set us up for success in the next 2 to 3 years. And it might seem like an imposition for these individual product teams to put in, a little code snippet or whatever it is, that I always felt, was kind of a thorn in my side as a product, when I was a, on the ground product manager. And now that, I'm more in a central team, I do have a deeper appreciation for, for where, these things were coming from. And one of the things I'm trying to do is better communicate that to other people, so that they don't have the same sort of lack of alignment that I often experienced as a game team PM.
Yeah, that's a great example, and totally relate to that in terms of new ahas coming into the new role. Awesome. Any other examples here?
I can share, Navya. I'm at a director level, so I'm supposed to be looking at the forest from the trees. But in order to attempt supporting your teams and helping them get unblocked, I do get into the weeds, and it takes conscious discipline to kind of say, I'm going to not worry about the day-to-day. I'm going to step back. And usually it's driven by the zoom out is forced by if there's a board of director meeting, or if there's an external pressure, then it's like, okay, everything has to pause, and we but it should be the other way around, right? Like, we should be able to spend enough time, prioritize the zoomed out view, and then kind of jump into the day-to-day details. So it's a challenge. So I'm eager to learn some frameworks from you today.
Yeah, and I definitely see that as a trend. I think we as product people are very a problem solver, so it's easy to zoom in, and it takes some effort to zoom out. So on that, actually, I want to ask my second question, and then we'll jump back into the presentation, which is, are there any stories from people where you were in a group setting and everybody was actually really zoomed out, and it wasn't until you zoomed in and drew attention to some detail were you actually able to make progress? So the inverse of what we spoke about.
I think that's like any meeting with like C staff or VPs that they're so that, oftentimes, when you're in these meetings, they don't necessarily concern themselves with implementation details. And part of they might only, in some ways, their only power is like headcount, like how much, what resources can I give you, and you can figure it out. And so, yeah, a lot of times, it might be hard to get them to understand like a nuance of something, or why it can't be as easy as 1, 2, 3, like enter, just for example, like entering China. Well, okay. How many people do you need? Yeah. Well, it's not that simple. There's a lot of nuances here. Well, that game did it with with this or that, so why can't we do it? And so getting into like the nuances of a situation, oftentimes it's not the right audience, so you don't want to necessarily, you have to kind of read the audience and make sure you're not having any career limiting moves here, but at the same time, you also want to make sure that you're effective in your role, and actually get the job done.
Totally. The whole internationalization, no big deal. I think some of us can definitely relate with that. Any other examples on that front? Right, quiet group today. All right, why don't we jump back in to the presentation? So let me share my screen again. All right. So on the topic of zooming in and zooming out, it's exactly what was discussed here, right? So it's as product leaders, there is a dilemma, but it's made to seem that it's really simple. Like, hey, be strategic, but and don't lose the big picture, but also know things at a ticket level and a status level. Be super mission oriented, but get your execution perfect. Not even good. It has to be all perfect, right? So there is it's always something that comes up, and as you start managing people, I think it becomes even harder because you're told, hey, give autonomy to your teams, they should be able to make their own decisions, but at the executive level or the leadership level, you're constantly justifying their why, you're constantly justifying the decisions your team is making, what features are coming, how are they going to work, and what are the business implications. So you need to know the details, but also empower your team. And I have to mention that we're in a pandemic right now, and there is a lot of zooming in and zooming out that happens where we are driving resilience in our teams, driving them towards outcomes, but we also have to pay attention to the situation realities of what's happening in the world, right? So to me, this is all a problem that's worth solving. So here I wanted to start with, on the why, I wanted to talk through a quote, which is, if you stand too close to a painting, all you see are patches of a color. But if you stand too far back, you can't see any of the detail. And this really resonated for me, especially as I was creating this presentation. I was thinking about I had to really zoom out, zoom in, and then zoom out again, and stand at the right place to be able to get a clear picture of how I should even create this presentation that resonates with this group of product leaders. And as we all talked about in our conversation earlier, it's hard to know where people are standing, but you definitely see the impact of bad product decisions because of the wrong Zoom setting. And everything that was discussed, it totally resonates. Early on in my career, I definitely had, I had lots of problems getting buy-in because I was missing the big picture, or I was pushing for things which weren't the right decisions because I didn't have the right data that I was looking at. So here are, it's basically wrong Zoom setting leads to bad product decisions. And even though you can't see the decision, you see the impact on the products that we all see around us. So yeah, in over 15 years of working with different executives, like one thing I did want to call out here is the people who I've seen effortlessly work the Zoom button in board directions are actually people who get really successful in product and even at executive level in other functions. And these are the people I've seen who in a crisis can actually zoom in, understand what's going on, and figure out how we get out of the situation, but at the same time maintain a zoomed out lens on what are the patterns and causes in these problems, right? And how can we as a leadership team make sure we're not getting into the crisis again? So to me, this is the why on why we should solve this problem. And the next thing I want to talk to you guys is now the how, right? So here is the meat of the presentation, and here is the 4 tips that I want to leave everybody with. And these are things that I've noticed in other people who are successful, things that I have used myself over the last several years and found helpful, and I hope it resonates with this group as well. So the 4 tips to master the art of zooming in and zooming out. The first one is make room to zoom. Second is have a conversation about conversation. Third, adapt to your audience. And fourth, run your personal impact retrospective. So let's talk about the first one, making room to zoom. So this is actually what my calendar looks like. And I color code my calendar so that I can see where I'm spending my time and be very intentional about time, because time to me is the biggest resource as a product leader. So really what I relentlessly fight for are those red blocks, right? And I negotiate with even my CEO to move meetings on a weekly basis, constantly move things around just so that I can protect time for strategic thinking. And we're all problem solvers, and it's always easy to zoom in. And if you don't make zooming out a priority, then it doesn't happen, you know. And so that for me is the biggest thing for me, which is have those strategic thinking blocks of time. And that's different than what I have in yellow. So like catching up on email, you need to block time for that. That's the only way I get work done. But most of the other time is actually spent zoomed in. The other tip here is finding that activity that gets your creative juices flowing. So sometimes you're so zoomed into a problem that you need to get out of that problem and see things from far. So for me, what's been really helpful always actually is going for a run. I always come back from a run with really good ideas. It used to be going swimming. I used to do that pre-pandemic. And I know for a number of people, it's, you know, hey, I just need to turn off my email, Slack, and just get out of my work mode, and then I'm going to have my good ideas coming to me. So the tip here is, you know, make room to zoom, own your calendar, and then really prioritize those activities that help you zoom out and get your creative juices flowing. And the second tip I have here is have a conversation about conversations. So the tip here is to be very intentional going into conversations. Do yourself a favor, do everybody else you work with a favor, and help them understand at what depth they should come in to a meeting, right? So every day before I end the day, I look at all the conversations I'm going to be in the following day and make sure I prepare for them. So for the people that I'm meeting one-on-one, we always have a document where we write down the topics that are worth discussing. And that way I know going into a one-on-one, am I going in to problem solve? Am I going in to provide feedback, right? And it just helps me come in with the right depth. And that also helps me give my teams more autonomy, right? So I don't constantly chase my team members on where things are at. It's basically the one-on-one or anytime you want is the time where you can ask me for help, right? But your updates will come in separately through a weekly update. And one thing we do at Peak really well is when we bring a group of cross-functional people together, we actually define for the meeting the POP, which is the purpose, outcome, and process. And if you think about, you know, we're all used to having agendas for meetings. I think the agenda does a really good job for purpose and outcome, but not really the process. So on the process side, it's actually helpful to tell the group, hey, we're going to talk about this, but the process is a brainstorm, or the process is you going through my slides and poking holes in it, right? Or I'm going to tell you all the things I've thought about, and then I'm expecting you to tell me what I haven't thought about, right? So really relaying the process in the POP is actually really helpful to help people come in with the right depth. The third tip I have is to adapt to your audience. And I'm talking to product leaders. So if I'm telling the product leaders, hey, know your customer, it seems like a no-brainer, right? Like, of course I know my customer. But the idea here is as you come into conversations, really think about how you can elevate the conversation, right? And if the team is really zoomed in, how can you zoom out and show them something that they're not seeing? And if everybody's really zoomed out, draw attention to that detail that they might be missing, right? Or maybe they're overgeneralizing things that they're not seeing clearly. So an example here would be just about 2 weeks ago, we were really excited about an idea that would drive revenue for our partners and for our company. And we got into the mode where we started to, you know, get an email ready. And the meeting was called to finalize the copy of the email in the next half an hour so that we could send it out before the holiday break to our operator base. And I was actually guilty of, you know, moving fast on that and providing feedback on the copy. And at that minute, I actually like hit pause in my mind and I said, is this the right thing to do? You know, and I just asked the question and I said, should we actually send the email or should we start calling people? You know, and it was as easy as asking the question because we've always just sent emails because it's the way to get the best reach. And that really helped change the trajectory of that particular initiative, right? We actually deployed the right people to call the key customers to inform them about this initiative. So again, it's about identifying the blind spots for the group. And while we're on the topic of the audience, I would say, like, as you're hiring and as you're joining teams, find ways to bring diversity in thinking. Whenever I hire, my whole team is always very complimentary. They're all actually, when we start to do social things together, it becomes difficult because everybody has such different interests. So I'm a strong believer in bringing diversity in leading and getting to the best outcomes with that. So that's my third advice. The fourth tip that I have here is running your personal retrospective. So this is something that I do religiously. Every quarter, I set up my own goals. So this is not, hey, my team is going to do this, the product is going to do this. It's actually what am I going to be involved in, and what are the initiatives that I'm going to drive. So here I look at what are some of the things that are lowlights. What are some of the things that we're not doing well at? Where are my blind spots? And then really creating initiatives around that. So an example here would be, I recently did a listening tour with several members of the company. So where I blocked out time for 2 weeks, just reached out to people to get firsthand feedback on our product and our processes and our product team, right? And that was something that was so valuable because the general themes were, oh, everything is great, the product is amazing, we love the product team, but it really helped expose some of the areas where I needed to zoom in and improve our processes. Right. Another example was myself running a cross-functional initiative that really wasn't anybody's priority. So it was important for the business, but nobody was paying attention to that. So I called that out as my own personal goal. So that's something I've been doing for years. I always set up my own personal goals. They change every month. I go and look at the list, and it's different. You know, I have to make changes, reprioritize things for myself. But because of this upfront planning, I'm able to use those big red strategic blocks of time well, right? I cannot come in on Monday and say, hey, I have this block of time. Now, how do I zoom out and be strategic? It does require me to have that discipline of setting up my initiatives, actually getting buy-in that those are the right things for me to focus on, so that when it's actually doing time, I can execute on those initiatives. So that was all my tips. To recap, the first tip was make room to Zoom, own your calendar, find activities that help you get creative and prioritize them. Second is have a conversation about conversation so that you can come in with the right depth into conversations. The third is adapt to your audience. Really look for blind spots for the people that you're working with. Help them adjust their Zoom setting. And then fourth is run your personal impact retrospective so that you know how you can maximize your impact to the product and to the company by using your strategic time most effectively. That's all that I had for you guys. I'm open to any questions.
Hi, sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so I think sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. It's my first webinar. The first advice you gave was really interesting for me, but how could you what do you do when like a problem is really important for you and sometimes you can't notice that you're not zooming out, like you're just going to the problem, but at the same time like you can't zoom out, like you're so into the problem and finding ways into fixing it that you don't realize that you're not actually zooming out but zooming more in. I don't know if it makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's something I've actually learned. Failure is the best learning experience. So I would say that I've failed so many times by just continuing to zoom in, and that's been a good reminder for me. So what's worked effectively for me is actually, and I'm looking to other ideas, is actually just turn off for the day and think about the problem. Like a lot of times I'm really struggling and I'm having a conversation with people trying to solve, and I just say, hey, let's just get back to it tomorrow. Let's just sleep on it. And it's been so effective for me. And in the next morning, I just have better thoughts, and we're able to see a better picture. So yeah, that's been most effective. I'm curious if other people have other tips to share for Fabiola.
I guess I have two things that I do. So one is I'll either play this game with myself or play it with somebody else, which is like asking why after every question and like forcing it, and basically like, okay, we want to do this, why? Oh, because it helps us do this, why? Well, because it helps us do this, why? And like with each layer like that, you can kind of sort of force a conversation of like, and it can also help you like poke
Yeah.
holes in your own argument. That like, oh, maybe this actually isn't as important as I thought. And that also kind of helps you like sometimes I'll even say it out loud and kind of practice saying it so that it helps me navigate that, because that'll be like essentially that's what product people always always do, is ask why. And so that kind of helps me sort of force that zooming out to get to like at the end of the day, what problem are we actually trying to solve, either as a company or for our users. So that's one method that I'll use. Another method that I'll use is I'll bring someone who doesn't know anything about the problem or knows very limited information about the problem, and I'll just like have a little session with them. Sometimes it's my husband who also works in tech in like an adjacent industry, and I'll kind of talk with him about it, and he'll kind of push back a little bit. Or sometimes I'll just have a one-on-one with a trusted colleague and just say, hey, I don't know what to do with this problem, and kind of spinning on it, and sometimes just explaining it to another person, but also having them sort of parrot it back to me, even if they don't necessarily have any advice. Sometimes like that it at least gives me a sounding board, and it also helps. They'll also kind of do that zooming out for you in some way.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I get what you mean by just talking to another person and just distressing, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'll add to that is when in doubt, talk to a user. And most of the times you will like, they really help you clear your head and like give you that zoomed out view, in some cases an even more detailed zoomed in view, where like, yeah, I wasn't even thinking about that level of information. Like my go-to is just have a roster of users, prospects, and pick up the phone and call them or schedule a 30-minute and say, hey, I just want to pick your brain, talk about, and be okay sharing your vulnerabilities as a product person, right? Saying, I'm struggling with this solution, or I'm struggling with this, what ideas do you have? And they really value that interaction. So that's my 2 cents. When in doubt, talk to a user.
So Oscar is actually one of our customers. So he's been on there. Thank you for joining, Oscar.
No, it was my pleasure. Yeah, is as a customer of English. Right now, I can tell you, Fabiola, the best thing for me is to cut the scene. Maybe if you have the whole day, half day, just a couple of hours, maybe take a walk, talk to a friend. In my case, in my personal case with Peak, I sit and spend hours crushing the system to find, because right now I'm doing some implementation for my former employee. So sometimes you get so many data, so many information that you have, hey, come on, just close the laptop, or get some get some beers, or find a friend to talk about anything. Refresh yourself, and then sit again, open your laptop, and believe me, in the case in the maybe if you're in engineering programming, because it might sometimes happen to me, you will find that semicolon that was missing with the project, or you got a better view of the problem. Okay, I have a daily routine with Peak right now, checking everything, and also with the website, and to find a solution. I have a like a chat with Peak, a daily chat. Hey guys, I found this. What do you think about this? Check it. Hey Oscar, you're right. Hey Oscar, no, you're wrong, because sometimes you are doing the wrong thing in the wrong way. But sometimes you find some bugs that, hey, they crash it. Okay, we can fix it. But you have to clear your mind to have the big visual of the problem.
Yeah, totally. So clearing your mind, getting that perspective,
Yeah.
whether it's your customers, whether it's your significant other or your friends. Those are so all great ideas. Any other questions?
Hey Navya, Anna here. Thanks so much for your tips. It's super helpful to kind of hear everyone else's perspectives on this as well. My question is kind of on just like the company culture and kind of like you as a product leader, if I'm working at a company that's a bit more sales driven per se rather than product driven, can you share a little bit of like your tips or experiences with trying to change that culture?
Yeah, yeah. And I've definitely been on those companies. And for me, what's worked really well is to demonstrate value for product. And it seems like, of course, we always want to demonstrate value, but I made it in my one of my old roles. I made it my own personal project to constantly demonstrate value on a regular basis to the executive team, show product-led growth in numbers and in quotes, qualitative and quantitative. And that's the only way I was able to change that mindset. And I would say that companies go through different stages where it's hard to say that, hey, this company is really sales driven or it's product driven. I think it's actually stages. Sometimes there's a stage of the company where they're really tech focused. Sometimes they're sales focused, so it could be that you're trying to pitch to the cause at the wrong time as well, so trying to zoom out and getting that perspective on what's important for the company. Is the company really focused on revenue and sales is driving that revenue? And if that's the case, then how can product drive revenue, and how can we do a much better job at showing value? So it's constantly aligning yourself with the business goals for the company, demonstrating value, but also understanding the stage that the company is at right now.
Thanks.
Any tips for Anna from the audience? It's a group of people who have really good experiences. Okay. Other questions? Okay.
Quite good today. I also want to just open up. We do a section called shout outs where you may want to talk about a project you're working on, or if you're hiring. Navya, you can give a redo of that Peak is hiring. And if you're looking for a job, feel free to introduce yourself, share a little bit, and so it opens up the doors to engage outside of the topic itself. So yeah, feel free to use this time to share something with us.
I wanted to share something, and maybe like this is just going off of what you were saying about some initiatives are tech driven. And so I'm in this scenario where, like, what Rosa said, the C-suite zoomed out, right? And it's difficult because I'm kind of like right caught in the middle. And then I know what the zooming in, like I know those details that it's hard to translate in a way where the C-suite would care about because they're so high level. And so we're in the middle of a project right now, migrating from our current platform to like a refactored one, like a new next generation platform. To our leadership, it's so simple, you know. The VP of engineering gave us this timeline because for him, it's just reverse engineering what we have currently, but better infrastructure. High level sounds really simple, but like zoomed in level, there's a lot of nuances where like, hey, if we're going to start from scratch, we got to do this right. And because of that, I can talk to users. I find that really difficult, and especially because it's tech driven, there's a lot of trust on our VP of engineering to get through this. And what I'm coming across is that even he is at a zoomed out level. And there's this rift between what management wants to achieve versus everyone who's like proletariat, for lack of a better label. Like, hey, you know, there's actually a lot that we're very, like, we all want the company to succeed, but if we miss all these details, this project's gonna fail. So I'm in the middle of that right now, and it's kind of hard because, right, like I don't want to like stop my career because I'm like part of the product leadership team. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot by like, hey, management, like let's zoom in a little bit more. This is actually more complex than we make it off to seem. But it seems like they've already committed to a deadline, so it's like, oh no, I'm stuck. So I just wanted to share my frustration. Maybe I'm just venting.
No, totally. I think the right thing to do, and would love to see if other people have thoughts here, but would be to get people to zoom in to the situational reality there, right? So if you've already committed, as product leaders, our job is to clarify what that means. You know, is that if you're committed to a deadline, can we actually reduce scope of what the technical re-architecture can be? And if we can't do that, you know, like really zooming in and showing what we're committing to, and the sooner we do that, the better. And you know, with engineering projects, that's actually something that's very common about underestimating the effort that goes in, you know. So hopefully you can have a very frank conversation first with the VP of engineering to get him zoomed in
Yeah.
on that aspect, because the sooner you flag that, the better for the whole company.
Yeah, I'm trying to flag it gently by saying, so what do you think about the timeline? Like every other week I ask him that. He seems to be confident still. So, but yeah, that's, you hit it right on the head. It's probably going to be a narrowing of the scope if we want to deliver on time.
I like to frame things in terms of like risks and mitigations. So a lot of times if there's a project, one thing, and maybe this is like a little bit of like know your audience, but at least within my domain, anytime you bring up like security or compliance, they're like, oh yeah, just they don't want to know about it, but they know it's important, and they don't, and they certainly don't want to deal with it themselves. So if I can like tie it, if I can like be like, oh yeah, this opens up to big security risks, they're like, oh, that's bad. But they also don't necessarily need to know the details, but they'll also give you as much funding as you need. So like so like I'll try to frame things like, hey, this opens up a lot of compliance risk, or like opens us up to like, you know, a hacker, you know, whatever, like security stuff, compliance stuff, business risk, but also like laying out the mitigation measures, like, hey, this is risk 1, risk 2, risk 3, which I know like are going to be sort of like triggers for for the executives. But then also coming out, you know, you don't just complain about a problem, you like suggest something. So like, how can we best mitigate each of these risks? And maybe it's like cut scope, increase headcount, you know, extend the deadline, or some combination of those three, to show that like that you are doing that work for them. In most cases, like they don't really want to get into the details. They want you to sort of make a recommendation and pick from a short list. So that if you put that legwork there, and ideally like 3 bullet points, 3, and sometimes also pictures work a lot better. Like I work also in a technical organization that oftentimes has to deal with like unrealistic expectations from C-suite. I've found that like simple pictures and drawings, that sounds a little bit condescending, but for non-technical C-suite staff, oftentimes that is like, the best way to kind of explain a relatively complex thing. So I'll usually frame it that way in terms of like risks and mitigations, and then technical things distilled down into like a really easy to follow picture.
Really. We also, we were in a situation like this, and we actually just got all the engineers together and had them rough size everything, so to put the number, put it in terms of this is the actual cost, which was a topic that everybody was avoiding until we got everybody together.
Super valuable. Navya, I have a question. How do you prioritize which zoomed out projects to spend most time on?
Yeah, so this is something I do every quarter, right? And I'm constantly looking for blind spots in the company or blind spots in team members. And because I think that if you define a business goal, the company does a really good job at rallying around it, So if it's like, hey, drive revenue, everybody's doing that, But for me, it's like, hey, what is everybody not thinking? And I think about it I actually go team by team, right? So like from a sales perspective, okay, they're doing something really well. Like, are they missing like the messaging, the product messaging, right? For the implementation team, maybe they're prioritizing speed, but they're not looking at quality. For the product team, maybe they're looking at at the velocity of features, but they're not looking at adoption, right? So it's very much around like really honing in on the blind spots. So I create time on my calendar, go team by team, and then think about the blind spots for the company. And then it's typically a really long list. And then I start to get feedback from people to understand if this is a good utilization of my time. And those are pretty eye-opening conversations typically, because those are things people haven't thought about as it comes to blind spots.
Super helpful. Thank you. I have another personal question. I struggle with this where you've got, a day full of, and we try to like block all meetings in morning hours since our team is in Europe and multiple countries in Europe. She started 6 and like 10 or 11 or noon, you're like back to back to back calls. I'm done after that. I'm so tired. Like, so how do you bring that, maybe like you said, running or taking a walk and coming back? Like, do you have strategies on refreshing your brain, where you have kind of optimizing the 2 hours that you have for deep work and focus work on zoomed out projects?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a tip that I read several years ago that's really resonated with me, which is, like people don't get burnt out by working a lot of hours, or not being able to do like get 10, 15 hours of sleep. It's really, people get burnt out if they don't prioritize the things that matter, So for me, it's like, hey, I have to go for a run several times in a week. And I just protect that time, even if it comes at the cost of me not being able to join a meeting, it's like really important for me. So I prioritize, time with my family, weekend time with the family. I prioritize running, and I protect the time, and everything else is fair game. So I pretty much put blocks on my calendar when needed, like, hey, no meetings after 5 o'clock, so that I could go for a run, and really pushing for it. And I've noticed that whenever I've dropped the boundary, I've struggled. I've either like gotten burnt out or not had time to think, and then really like resented work. So and this was the advice that was given to me, which is protect the things that matter. And it wasn't until I implemented it and like really took it to heart did I see the benefits of that.
Yeah, that's very powerful. That'll stick to me. Thank you.
I think it was Marissa Meyer who said that.
Awesome. Any other thoughts, questions? You want to share projects, concerns folks have? This is a free form discussion, so please feel free to jump in. No? Any shout outs? Anyone wants to share a project? Okay. Zoom fatigue, I can sense.
I'll do a quick little shout out for Products That Count. We have the Product Awards coming up in just a few weeks. It's a really fun event celebrating the best in products out there. And we just put out all the nominees for every stage, and there's some really amazing gems in there. So I'm going to pop this into the chat, check it out, join us. And because there's some tools in there that you may not know about that you probably should.
I definitely went to the awards last year and found it very valuable, and I'm going this year too. Big fan of Products That Count and all the events that you guys come up with.
Fantastic.
I do have a question. It's more like a, yeah, just Navya, I'm sorry. You said that Peak is actively hiring right now. Is there any position on product?
Not in the product team. I just finished my hiring in the product team, unfortunately. But we have a product/marketing role, which is the head of B2C that we're looking for. But it would be worthwhile to continue to look at peak.com/jobs because things could change in the next few months, but not right now in the product side.
Thank you.
And Navya, what is the best way to stay in touch with you? Is it LinkedIn or shoot you an email? How can folks make sure that they're in contact?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is great. Otherwise, email works as well. I'm navya@peak.com.
Super. Okay, if nobody has anything else, Navya, any parting thoughts, and we'll give people back their 10 minutes.
Yeah, no, it was great to be here. I would love feedback. This is actually a topic that I specifically created for Products That Count. Neha told me I can't reuse any of the work I've done in my career. So yeah, I would love to get feedback. Otherwise, have a good rest of the evening, you guys.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Navya, for your time. And we look forward to more participation going forward. And next month, again, will be first week of March. And hopefully we'll see you all at the Product Awards. Thank you, Navya. I really appreciate your time and great conversation today.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, bye-bye.